Are you a business owner stuck in fear, doubt, and worry about what the marketplace will look like in the future? Then this show is for you. Strap on your seatbelt and get ready to disrupt and innovate. Here's your host, Lisa Levy.
It is my pleasure to introduce today's guest, Colin Kingsmill, a passionate advocate for rediscovering our shared community and living in alignment with our true selves. Colin believes that in today's world, we've become disconnected from our essence, caught up in the whirlwind of division, identity politics, and the relentless noise of negative news cycles. He sees these forces, along with corporate and special interest greed, as the culprits that crush our souls and prevent us from truly thriving. He's on a transformative mission to help people reconnect with their humanity, live with integrity, and face life fearlessly. Through his work, he empowers individuals to break free from the suffering and limitations holding them down, helping them remember who they are and who they are meant to become. As a driving force behind the Enough Already movement, Colin is dedicated to creating a world where people are united in purpose, thriving in their authenticity, and collectively changing the world for the better. You guys know why he's here. It makes a lot of sense. Join us today as we explore Colin's journey, his vision for the future, and how he's inspiring others to live fearlessly and with purpose. Colin, welcome to the conversation.
Hey, thank you so much. It's great to be here, and thank you for that great introduction. My gosh, I feel honored to be here. Thank you for that.
You're absolutely welcome. It's my little gift to try and make everybody feel as welcome, and with a little bit of surprise in how I do it. It's not necessarily just your bio.
I noticed that. Thank you. That's good. It was great.
Absolutely. With that, I've set a stage. I've already set the table. But Colin,
Yep.
will you tell and describe for the audience what it is that you're really doing and why it's so important right now?
Mm-hmm. So I guess there's a couple of things that I'm doing to be disruptive in the world that we're living in, and the first one is really reimagining the way we do leadership and coaching, leadership development and coaching. And for the longest time, I think coaching and leadership development and executive training and things like that have they've served their purpose, right? But in 2024, with the world that has seemingly become so complex and the pressures on us are so great, myself and my team, my colleagues, we were feeling a little bit like whether it was a leadership workshop or a training or a retreat or an hour of coaching, it felt as though, and maybe you've seen this as well, it felt as though we were in an emergency room triage, right? So people would come in, they would get that dose of sort of positivity and ideas and reflection and all of those things that are designed around leadership development. And they would leave and they would go back into this world that was and is so full of toxicity. And it just feels as though the world is sick and we need change. And so we said enough already. This whole industry needs to change, and we're going to do it. So we called it whole human coaching. First of all, to recognize that we are whole human beings, right? So when you go into those places and spaces, it feels as though you go through over the threshold of the door, and you've got to leave all of you behind and focus on the sort of the performative art of being a successful entrepreneur or a successful manager or leader, right? So we're shaking up that industry. And on the other side, I am starting this movement called Enough Already that's basically saying the same thing about every industry that is on the planet. I mean, I was talking to my trainer this morning and he's like, we need to change the personal training industry. It's not enough. It doesn't look at people holistically. I have a friend who runs a well-being and a wellness company, and she's bridging, well-being from ancient wisdom to modern science, again, disrupting the whole healthcare apparatus, right? I don't know, maybe and you probably know this better than me, but it feels as though it's a moment where we need to break the old paradigms, the old models. It doesn't feel like they're working anymore. So, yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree, and I'm snickering because in a previous incarnation, a podcast that I hosted in the past was "Break Everything in Healthcare." Right, I just went
Okay.
right, right. I do. I wholeheartedly believe that there are so many things that are broken that I personally become really frustrated when I listen to the news and I hear Fortune 500, Fortune 100 CEOs talking about we need to go back. We need to do the things we used to do. And
Right.
I'm so angered by that because
Mhm.
angered, frustrated, I don't know, depends on the
Sure.
day, I guess, the level of
Yeah.
emotion I give it, the
Yeah.
amount of energy I give to the topic, but
Sure.
we can't go backwards. I think it's a broken it's a broken logic to be able to go back. You can't, we can only move forward and make
Yep.
new choices, different choices, and see what happens. And we
Yep.
see that everyone around us is in some way, shape, or form suffering. We
Hmm.
are over in the United States. We have a toxic work culture. We believe in working harder, not necessarily smarter,
Yep.
and nobody likes to actually say that. I was listening to and reading an article from a CEO in Norway and talking about work life balance. And it's such a big topic here in the US, in North America, because our work model is a little bit different,
Sure.
but it's like legitimately structured. When you are done working in some European countries, you turn off work,
Sure.
and you cannot and you should not turn it back on. And we have no concept of that. So what
Yep.
you're doing and starting to look at whole person, I think is so critically important, because if we walk into our leadership roles broken in some
Hmm.
other aspect of our lives, whether that's emotionally, whether it's
Yep.
from a diet, nutrition, health perspective, right, whatever we bring in is there with us whether we acknowledge it or not.
And it makes such an impact, right? So if you've got somebody coming into the office space or coming into the workspace that it doesn't eat properly, right, or doesn't have the proper nutrition, that affects their mental health, that affects their levels of anxiety, levels of depression, and a myriad of other factors that they're bringing into the office with you or with them, right? So how can we legitimately say we're doing leadership development or training or coaching or anything like that, or even being a manager and not recognizing what people are bringing from their home? And that could be anything. It could be addiction. It could be coping mechanisms that are helpful for them. I mean, you know the drill. And I think it's foolish for us to think that we can't look at things more holistically today. You have to. It's affecting everybody, and you see, I'm sure if you've been in healthcare, you see the statistics all over the place, right, of how people are not healthy. So how are they supposed to perform when, as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as a manager? Yeah, I feel, I don't know about you, but it feels as though we're walking around kind of pretending that the elephant isn't in the room, right? It's like, oh, just do another course, just do another thing. Oh, here we'll give you some coaching, or here we'll, give you an extra week off, or take a mental health day. Okay,
And I wholeheartedly believe in a good, well-timed mental health day, but it is
sure,
a band-aid. It is not treating root cause. It is not changing the
yep,
behavior that led to needing all of that. But
yep,
I'm all for the idea of it. Colin, with the work that you've done, right, in leadership coaching, as you're
yep,
building into the movement of enough already,
yep.
can you share with us a story of a journey that you've been on with a client, with somebody, where you've actually seen the transformation and what that meant for their business?
There's a few examples that I've worked with quite a few people that have had unrecognized trauma in their lives, and unrecognized trauma has translated to a whole ethos in the office space, right, of unlimited boundaries, not being able to set boundaries, control issues, needing to um, needing to make sure everything was managed properly, not being able to go, not being able to delegate. So So a lot of the stories that I have seen recently have been non-therapeutic, but it is the recognition of traumas unrecognized, going back and seeing where they are, what is the origin story,
Yeah.
unpacking that story, and being able to free yourself in the workplace today. And I've seen more and more and more and more of that just in the last few years. And our greatest success, my greatest success, is being able to pinpoint, right, to hear it and pull it out of someone, and then there's an aha moment with almost everybody.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, hold on, I'm acting like the 12-year-old that that thought I had a dysfunctional family and I had to take care of my little brother and I had to take care of my older parents and they were going through a divorce, and therefore I'm doing the same thing in the office today as a legal professional in London, for example, right?
Yeah.
So for me, the greatest success is really when they discover those moments of, oh, hold on, this is a story, it's a narrative that I'm repeating in 2024 that's from 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. So those are the greatest success moments for me, because it's liberating, right? And the connection to what we're doing with Enough Already. I've been trying to write a book called Fearless for a few years, and in the last couple of years, so yeah, it's been at least 5, but in the last couple of years, I'm like, oh, it's not just fear. What else is going on? Like what? And that's where I sort of started to think of, well, if you can remember who you are as a human being and kind of put that into perspective, and we're on this little rock, spinning through the galaxy at 1,500 kilometers an hour on our axis. And, oh, okay, well, that kind of puts things into perspective. And if you began to think that we're one lineage on one planet, oh, well, maybe I would treat people differently. And maybe maybe corporations wouldn't be so unhuman, right, as they are today. I started to think of, well, if you can think of your humanity and that one lineage, and we're all one on a little rock, and then if you can live in integrity and be who you really are, you begin to be less fearful, and you can begin to be untethered from those stories that we tell ourselves, and that society kind of grinds into us on social media or the news cycle, more and more. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
You took us on a couple of little journeys, and that's sort of
okay.
that was absolutely the point of where we were headed with that. While you're working with your clients and in building, are there, over the last 4 years, how we do things changed? We have a lot more of this
Sure.
online interaction, and as opposed to being in a room eyeball to eyeball with
Yeah.
somebody.
Yeah.
Does that impact us and how we show up with our humanity or lack thereof?
It,
Whether we're in a room or in a virtual room.
it absolutely does. It allows for, I think it allows for toxic positivity to kind of show up, right? When people do come together and they do finally intersect eyeball to eyeball in person, it's always a bit of a love fest, right? But they don't, because they retract back behind the screen and back into remoteness, right? The real stuff doesn't come out. We did this exercise recently, and it was called a métissage, where you just kind of start a sentence and you allow everybody in the team to finish it and see where everybody goes, and then you share a lot of, and the sharing circle was really positive, but then the written stuff was all the negativity came out. And for me, that's evidence of, well, when we're together for a moment in time, it can be wonderful and it can be beautiful. But then when we retract away, a little bit like social media and anonymous accounts, and how you can turn into a different person on social media if it's not your public persona. So I'm craving for the day when we become more connected, because um it's hurting people, and people are suffering, and all you have to do is look at the amount of pills that are being popped every day in the United States and Canada too, right? And even the Western Europe and things like that. We're suffering, and it's got to change.
It absolutely does. So I appreciate the exercise, the métissage,
Yeah.
where so you start a sentence and have everybody finish it in person verbally, again remotely in writing, and how you got to, the love fest, or right, you use the phrase toxic positivity in that first room in that group where there's actually literal connection.
Mm.
And then as we step away, we start to filter it through other lenses.
Yes.
And I think that's a really important point for us to, hold on for a second with the audience, because our world is going to continue to be virtual and in person, right? And we're going to be moving in and out of these spaces, and that is part of the new normal and the reality.
Sure.
But how do we find and hold on to our authentic self, right? Those two representations are both elements of who we are, the
Hmm.
extremely positive and potentially the extremely negative. Where do we
Hmm.
find that center? How do we ground ourselves?
That's a very good question, and we probably don't have enough time to explore it. But the whole idea, and Martha Beck actually does a wonderful job of this in her book, The Way of Integrity.
Mhm.
I would highly recommend it for anybody in your audience. But the it's complex, Lisa, because I think it requires acknowledgement, first of all, that you're wearing a mask, right? That you're putting on a mask. And a lot of the work that I do is asking people to try and quantify how much energy and resources is that taking, right?
Yes.
How much does it take for you? How much of your fuel, right? I love engine metaphors, so pardon me. But the idea is, how much of your fuel tank are you expending on being something else for somebody else, right? And so that's the starting question, right? Is and the second question is, okay, if we can do an inventory of that and quantify it, the second question is, what could you do? What are the possibilities of, if you were not putting that mask on and expending all of that energy, what could you do with all of those resources? Right? And then you start to think, oh, well, wait, if I didn't have to do this and please that person and set that boundary and say yes to this and all this other stuff, I could actually start to live again and be who I am, right? And be the disruptor, be the mother, be the parent, be the nurse, be the whatever, but with more life force, right?
And I'm a big fan of engine metaphors as well, right? So what you
No,
just described to me is, right, tuning the engine for
yeah.
optimal performance and making sure that we are, when we press the accelerator, we have the energy to go, and that when we're steering, right, we have the ability to take it and course correct in places that we want it to go.
Mm,
Masks, right? Very powerful analogy, because they are a series of them. But you had a
yeah.
moment there.
Yeah. I was just going to say, the direction of travel is so important too, right? I speak so much about, when people are kind of lost in this fog today that is so
Mm.
challenging to move around in, or to navigate. I my advice is, well, why don't you say you're a boat or a yacht or a sailboat, and what's the port of destination? What is the port that, where are you going, and what does that look like? Because that's your life, right? And describe it to me in detail, right? And paint the picture. What does it look and feel and smell like, and who's there and what's there and all that other stuff. But then you've got to, once you've set that milestone marker into the future, you've got to course correct, just as if you're sailing every day, right? Every day is a course correction. We can't live on autopilot, right? If you live on autopilot, you're going to end up way off course. So anyway, I just wanted to add that little note into the direction of travel, which you were speaking about. And I'm sorry I went from a car to a boat, but you get the point.
Direction of travel, and the boat is fine, right? Wind, right, changes the direction of sail, so we do have to course correct
Yeah.
while we're driving. People lose sight of the fact of how much, when you have your hands on the steering wheel, how much you're actually moving constantly, right, to stay in the
Mm,
center of two lanes. It is not a set it and forget it activity.
love it.
A neuroscientist many years ago did an exercise. He was speaking in front of an audience, and he said, okay, put your hands up like they're on the steering wheel and make a right hand turn. Okay, now you're going straight. Now, what do? Right? You bring the steering wheel back. But if you don't think about it, right, the turn becomes a continuous loop, but our brain automatically, as soon as we made that corner, brings us back to center and that
Yeah.
compensating. And it was really eye-opening to watch how many people, when told to turn right, they stayed there forever, right? They kept turning and didn't come back to, you don't then drive
Interesting.
in a circle.
Huh. So yeah, you come right back to where you were before.
Yeah. And our
Interesting.
brain does it by itself. So to, bringing
Right.
this all together, right? We are relearning how to interact with people in
Mm-hmm.
person and in remote spaces, and navigating through, toxic cultures and toxic media and toxic things that are around us, that everybody is starting to acknowledge that it's not okay, but we're all
Yeah.
still trying to figure out what to do about it. And Enough Already sounds like a wonderful place to start with that. So, Colin, if people's interest is, or if they're curious, their interest is piqued, where can they learn more?
They can start to learn more at enoughalreadymovement.com. That's a good place to start, or just reach out to me on Instagram, Colin Kingsmill, or on Twitter or X. Sorry, same thing, Colin Kingsmill. I'm easily findable. Just type in my name, and I'm on LinkedIn once in a while, but I found that has really sort of changed a lot. So it
For
feels
the
like a different.
audience, all of the links will be in the show notes, so it's easy
Great.
enough for you to find. Colin, today, I mean, we've talked through some fabulous topics, really, the importance of what coaching can mean for individuals and teams, but why there's a macro context that's so much more important.
Mm,
And there is no way to go into a workshop for a day and make lasting change, right? That's just setting the tone for the future.
yep.
The
Yep.
goal and the idea of one humanity and following that thread is so impactful. And it is an important thought that I think we all need to be a tad bit more intentional, definitely as authentic as we possibly can be, and in every situation showing up with real integrity. These are points that will make our businesses more successful, our personal lives more successful, and let us actually stand as a whole human, regardless of if it's our work life or our private personal life. We are whole and complete, and that way we're showing up as our best possible selves. To my audience members, you know my rules. Don't get left behind. Join me next time.
That's it for today's episode of Disrupt and Innovate. Head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show.